The transport ship touched down on Nexus Prime with a loud hiss of steam and metal. Through the small window, Hana watched alien students move across the landing pad. Their bodies were nothing like hers. Some had skin that looked like broken glass. Others moved like giant snakes. A few buzzed their wings as they walked. Hana picked up her old backpack. Everything she owned fit inside it. Her clothes, some food from Earth, and her grandfather's wooden flute. The flute was older than she was. Her grandfather had carved it himself in the mountains where she grew up. The ship door opened with a bang. Hot air rushed in. It smelled different from Earth air, sharper, more electric. Hana stepped onto the metal ramp and looked around. The Galactic Beast Taming Academy stood before her like a mountain made of silver and glass. Towers reached up into the pink sky. Strange symbols glowed along the walls. In the distance, she could hear roars and calls from creatures she had never seen before. Other students stared at her as she walked toward the main building. Their eyes were not friendly. Some whispered to each other. Others just watched her with cold interest. Hana had expected this. Humans had never been allowed at the academy before. She was the first. A tall figure approached her. His skin was pale blue and covered in what looked like tiny crystals. His eyes glowed white. This was Director Corvain, of Vorth. Hana had seen pictures of his species before. They could speak with their minds instead of their mouths. "You must be the human," Corvain said. His voice sounded like it came from inside her head. "Hana from Earth." "Yes, sir," Hana replied out loud. Her voice sounded small compared to his mental speech. "Follow me. The other students are waiting." They walked through halls made of smooth stone. Pictures on the wall showed students from past years standing next to amazing creatures. Giant birds with metal feathers, cats that seemed to be made of living fire, wolves with too many eyes. Each picture showed a student and their bonded animal working together. Hana wondered if she would ever have a picture like that. The great hall was huge. Hundreds of students sat at long tables. When Hana walked in, the room became quiet. All eyes turned to look at her. She felt her face get hot with embarrassment. Director Corvain walked to the front of the room. His crystal skin began to glow brighter. "Students," his voice filled everyone's mind at once. "Today we welcome our newest member. Hana comes to us from the planet Earth. She is the first human ever accepted to our academy." A sound like laughter came from one section of the room. Hana looked over and saw a group of snake-like beings. Their leader was a female with golden scales and bright green eyes. She was beautiful in a dangerous way. "Director Corvain," the snake woman said. Her voice was smooth like honey but with poison underneath. "With respect, how can a human possibly succeed here? Their species still makes noise with their mouths to talk. They have no natural abilities at all." More laughter came from other tables. Hana felt her hands shake a little. She put them behind her back so no one would see. "Thessian," Corvain said to the snake woman. "Every species has its own gifts. We will see what the human can do." Thessian smiled, showing sharp white teeth. "Of course, Director. I look forward to seeing these human gifts." Corvain continued the welcome speech, but Hana stopped listening. She looked around the room at all the different species. The Vorth students sat together, their crystal skin glowing as they shared thoughts. The Silthari, like Thessian, moved in smooth, flowing ways. Their scales changed color as their moods shifted. At another table sat the Kithara. They looked like huge insects that walked on two legs. Blue electricity jumped between their hands as they talked to each other. Hana had read that they could control creatures by sending electric signals into their brains. Every species in the room had evolved to control animals in some way. The Vorth used mental power. The Silthari made special smells that calmed creatures. The Kithara used electricity. What did humans have? After the welcome, students began to leave for their rooms. Hana stayed in her seat, not sure where to go. A Kithara student buzzed over to her. Electric sparks danced around his head. "You look lost, human," he said. His voice sounded like static from a broken radio. "I am Jiho. I can show you to the dormitories." "Thank you," Hana said. "I would like that." As they walked, Jiho explained how the academy worked. First-year students start with Class C creatures. These are small and not very dangerous. If you can bond with them, you move up to Class B, then Class A. Very few students ever get to try Class S creatures. "What makes a creature Class S?" Hana asked. Jiho's electric sparks turned red. "Class S creatures can destroy cities. Some can destroy planets. They are kept in the deepest parts of the academy. Most students never even see them." They reached the dormitory building. Jiho pointed to a door marked with earth symbols. Your room. Dinner is in 2 hours. Try not to embarrass your entire species on the first day. He buzzed away, leaving Hana alone in the hallway. She opened her door and went inside. The room was small but comfortable. A bed, a desk, and a window that looked out over the practice yards. Through the window, she could see students working with their creatures. A fourth boy stood perfectly still while a crystal bear walked circles around him. Their minds were connected, sharing thoughts. A Silthari girl danced with a creature that looked like a flying snake. Her movements were hypnotic, and the snake followed every step. A group of Kythera students worked together to control a pack of metal wolves. Electric signals jumped from the students to the animals, creating a perfect team. Hana watched for a long time. Everyone made it look so easy. Their abilities worked perfectly with the creatures they controlled. She touched her grandfather's flute through her backpack. What could a simple wooden instrument do against such power? As the sun set over Nexus Prime, Hana sat on her bed and thought about home. In the mountains of Earth, her grandfather had taught her to play music for the wild animals. Deer would come close when she played. Birds would land on her shoulders. Even dangerous predators would stop and listen, but that was Earth. This was different. These were alien creatures that had never heard human music before. These were students who had trained their whole lives to work with animals. What chance did a simple human girl have? Outside her window, she heard a sound that made her heart jump. It was deep and powerful, like a roar, but sadder. It came from somewhere far below the academy. From the deepest levels where no students were allowed to go, Hana pulled out her grandfather's flute and held it in her hands. The wood was smooth and warm. It felt like home. Without thinking, she began to play a simple song her grandfather had taught her. The melody was soft and peaceful. It reminded her of mountain streams and wind through pine trees. She did not know that far below, in the restricted levels of the academy, something ancient heard her music and stirred for the first time in centuries. She did not know that her simple human song was about to change everything. The first morning at the academy began with loud bells that hurt Hana's ears. She got dressed quickly and followed other students to the dining hall. The alien students moved in groups based on their species. No one sat alone except her. Hana took her food and found an empty table in the corner. The food was strange but tasted okay. As she ate, she listened to conversations around her. Most students talked about which creatures they hoped to bond with first. I want to try the crystal bears, said a fourth student. My older brother bonded with one last year. He says their minds are beautiful to touch. The star cats are better, replied another fourth. They hunt in space. Imagine flying between planets with a creature like that. At the Silthari table, Thessian spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. My family has bonded with moon serpents for 12 generations. I will do the same. It is in my blood. She looked directly at Hana. Some species are born for this work. Others should stay home and tend gardens. The Kythera students buzzed with excitement. The metal wolves work best in groups, said Jiho. One student alone cannot control them, but 3 or 4 of us together can make them dance like lightning. After breakfast, all first-year students went to their first class. Instructor Vex waited for them in a large room filled with cages and glass boxes. She was Kythera, like Jiho, but older and covered in scars. One of her arms had been replaced with metal. Electric sparks jumped from her wounds. Welcome to basic creature bonding, Vex said. Her voice crackled like fire. Today you will attempt to connect with Class C creatures. These are small and mostly safe. If you cannot handle a Class C creature, you will not last 1 week here. She pointed to different cages around the room. Forest sprites, moon rabbits, singing crystals, flame birds. Each of you will choose one creature and try to make a connection. You have 2 hours. The students spread out quickly. Hana watched as her classmates moved with confidence toward different cages. They had been preparing for this their whole lives. Their families had taught them techniques passed down for thousands of years. Drakon, a tall Vorth student, approached a cage containing a crystal bear cub. The small creature looked like a regular bear, but its fur was made of clear crystal that caught the light. Drakon sat in front of the cage and closed his eyes. His crystal skin began to glow. Hana could not hear his thoughts, but she could see the effect. The crystal bear cub stopped pacing and sat down. Its crystal fur began to glow with the same light as Drakon's skin. After a few minutes, the cage door opened by itself. The bear cub walked out and sat next to Drakon like an old friend. Excellent, Instructor Vex said. Perfect mental connection. The bear trusts you completely. At another cage, Thessian danced slowly in front of a moon rabbit. Her scales changed from gold to silver to deep blue. Sweet smells filled the air around her. The rabbit's eyes became dreamy and peaceful. It hopped to the edge of its cage and pressed its nose against the glass. Thessian opened the cage and the rabbit jumped into her arms. "Very good," Vex said. "Your pheromones have made the creature completely calm. It sees you as a friend." 3 Kythera students worked together on a group of tiny metal wolves. Blue electricity flowed between all 3 students. The wolves began to move in perfect formation, their metal fur standing up from the electric charge. When the students raised their hands, all 6 wolves stood on their back legs. When they lowered their hands, the wolves rolled over as one. "Impressive teamwork," Vex noted. "You are controlling their nervous systems directly." Other students had similar success. Fire sprites danced with Silthari students. Crystal birds sang along with Vorth mental music. Electric eels swam in patterns guided by Kythera signals. Then Instructor Vex looked at Hana, who stood alone near a cage of forest sprites. These creatures looked like tiny green humans with wings like dragonflies. They were supposed to be the easiest creatures to bond with. "Human student," Vex said. "You have not chosen a creature yet." "I was watching the others learn," Hana said. "I wanted to understand how it works. Understanding comes from doing. Choose now." Hana walked to the forest sprite cage. The tiny creatures were beautiful, with skin like leaves and eyes like dewdrops. She sat down and tried to copy what she had seen Draken do. She closed her eyes and tried to think peaceful thoughts toward the sprites. Nothing happened. She tried making herself smell nice like Thessian had done. She breathed deeply and tried to send out calming feelings. The sprites flew to the back of their cage and huddled together. Hana tried moving her hands like the Kythera students, hoping to send some kind of signal. The sprites began making high-scared noises. "Enough," Instructor Vex said. "Try a different creature." Hana moved to the moon rabbit cage. These fluffy white creatures were known for being friendly. Even young children from most species could pet them safely. Hana held out her hand and spoke softly. "Hello, little rabbit. I will not hurt you." The rabbit took one look at her and ran to the far corner of its cage. It turned its back to her and would not look at her again. She tried the singing crystals next. These creatures looked like small rocks, but they made beautiful music when they were happy. Hana sat near their cage and tried humming a song her grandfather had taught her. The crystals stopped singing completely. They went dark and still, like they were afraid. By the end of class, every other student had successfully bonded with at least one creature. Hana had been rejected by everything she approached. The other students watched her failures with growing amusement. "Perhaps humans are better at bonding with their own food animals," Thessian suggested with false sweetness. "I hear they keep creatures called cows and chickens." The Vorth students made their crystal skin flash in patterns that Hana knew meant laughter. The Kythera buzzed with static that sounded like giggling. Instructor Vex wrote something on her tablet. "Human student, report to my office after dinner. We need to discuss your future here." The rest of the day was more of the same. In combat training, other students practiced with their bonded creatures while Hana sat alone. In creature psychology class, she could not answer questions about mental connections she had never felt. In species biology, she learned about abilities her own species did not have. At dinner, she sat by herself again. The other students whispered and pointed. Some made jokes just loud enough for her to hear. "How long do you think she will last?" asked a Vorth student. 3 days, replied another. "Maybe less if she keeps scaring the animals." "I heard Director Corvain only accepted her because Earth threatened to stop trading with the galaxy," said Thessian. "Politics, not ability." Hana ate quickly and left the dining hall. She walked through the halls listening to sounds from the practice rooms. Happy creature noises mixed with proud student voices. Everyone was making friends except her. She reached her room and closed the door. Through her window, she could see the practice yards lit up for evening sessions. Students worked with creatures under bright lights. Their bonds grew stronger every minute. Hana pulled out her grandfather's flute. In the mountains of Earth, music had always helped her feel better. She began to play a sad song about being far from home. The melody drifted out her window and across the practice yards. Some students looked up from their work, wondering where the strange sound came from. A few creatures stopped what they were doing and tilted their heads to listen. But Hana did not notice these reactions. She played with her eyes closed, thinking about home and wondering if she had made a terrible mistake coming here. Deep below the academy, in levels most staff had forgotten existed, something heard her music for the second time. Ancient eyes opened a little wider. A mind older than most civilizations began to remember things it had tried to forget. The sound of the flute reminded it of songs from long ago. Songs sung by voices that had been silent for millions of years. Songs that meant something more than just pretty sounds. But Hana knew none of this. She finished her song and put the flute away. Tomorrow she would meet with Instructor Vex and probably be sent home in shame. Her dream of becoming a beast tamer would end before it had really begun. She did not know that her failure to bond with the practice creatures was not really failure at all. She did not know that every creature she had approached had sensed something in her that was too important to treat casually. She did not know that she was already bonded to something far more powerful than any Class C creature, something that was waiting patiently for her to understand who she really was. 3 months had passed since Hana arrived at the academy. 3 months of failure and embarrassment. She had tried to bond with dozens of creatures and failed every time. The other students no longer bothered to hide their laughter. Even the instructors looked at her with pity. Today was different, though. Today was the first major test that would decide who stayed and who went home. All first-year students had to bond with a Class B creature in front of the Academy's board of directors. Success meant moving to advanced classes. Failure meant immediate expulsion. Hana sat in the arena with the other students. The board of directors filled the high seats around them. Director Corvain sat in the center, his crystal skin glowing bright blue. Next to him sat directors from every major species in the galaxy. They had come to watch the new students prove themselves. The test creature today is a phantom stalker, announced Instructor Vex. This is one of the most challenging Class B creatures. It exists between our world and the shadow dimension. Only students with perfect mental discipline can maintain contact with it. A cage was brought into the arena. Inside was something that hurt to look at. The phantom stalker kept changing between solid and see-through. Sometimes it looked like a giant black cat. Sometimes it looked like smoke with glowing red eyes. Sometimes it disappeared completely and only the sound of breathing showed it was still there. Draken will attempt first, Vex announced. The tall Vorth student walked confidently to the cage. His crystal skin began to sing, making high musical notes that filled the arena. The phantom stalker became more solid as it listened. Its form stabilized into something like a shadow panther. Drakon opened the cage and held out his hand. The creature sniffed his fingers, then allowed him to touch its head. For 30 seconds, boy and shadow beast stood connected. Then the stalker flickered and became see-through again. Drakon stepped back, breathing hard but smiling. Acceptable, said Director Corvain. 30 seconds of stable contact. Thessian went next. She moved like water flowing, her scales shifting through every color of the rainbow. Sweet smells filled the air around her. The phantom stalker became curious, moving closer to the cage door. When she opened the cage, the creature stepped out carefully. Thessian continued her hypnotic dance, and the stalker followed her movements. For 45 seconds, they moved together like partners. Then the creature suddenly phased out and reappeared behind her. Security guards had to step in quickly. 45 seconds, Corvain noted. Well done. Jiho and 2 other Kithra students worked together next. Blue electricity flowed between all 3 of them, creating a complex pattern in the air. The phantom stalker's form became more solid as it reacted to their bioelectric signals. The creature allowed all 3 students to approach. They surrounded it and maintained their electric connection for over a minute. The board members nodded with approval. This was the best result so far. Finally, it was Hana's turn. The arena became very quiet. Students leaned forward in their seats, expecting to see her fail spectacularly. Some were already smiling, ready to laugh at whatever embarrassing thing would happen. Thessian whispered to her friends, "Watch this. The human will probably run away screaming." Hana walked slowly to where the phantom stalker waited in its cage. The creature was more agitated now after being handled by 3 different groups. It phased in and out rapidly, never staying solid for more than a few seconds. She looked at the board of directors. Every face showed doubt or curiosity about what foolish thing she would try. She looked at her fellow students. Most seemed excited to watch her fail. Instead of using any approved technique, Hana sat down cross-legged in front of the cage. She reached into her backpack and pulled out her grandfather's wooden flute. The arena erupted in confused murmurs. "What is the human doing?" asked a board member. "Is that some kind of primitive tool?" asked another. Thessian laughed out loud. She thinks she can make music at it. How pathetic. Even Director Corvain looked puzzled. In all his centuries of experience, he had never seen anyone try to bond with a dangerous predator using simple music. Hana ignored all the voices around her. She closed her eyes and began to play. The melody was different from the sad songs she played alone in her room. This music was deeper and more complex. It had harmonics that seemed to come from somewhere beyond normal sound. The notes echoed strangely in the arena, as if the walls themselves were singing along. The effect on the Phantom Stalker was immediate and shocking. The creature stopped phasing in and out. Its form became completely solid for the first time since being captured. Instead of looking like a dangerous predator, it looked calm and peaceful. It lay down in its cage like a contented house cat. The arena fell completely silent. Even the board members stopped whispering. Hana continued to play, unaware of the amazed faces around her. The music seemed to flow through the air like water, touching everyone who heard it. Some students felt tears on their faces without knowing why. Others felt a deep peace they had never experienced before. But something else was happening that no one expected. Deep below the arena, emergency alarms began to sound. Red lights flashed in control rooms as technicians stared at their instruments in disbelief. Every containment system in the academy was registering activity. The most dangerous creatures in the galaxy's most secure prison were waking up. On level 5, a void devourer pressed against its quantum containment field. This creature could eat entire space stations, but it had been sleeping peacefully for decades. Now it stirred, turning toward the direction of the music. On level 7, the stellar worm began to move for the first time in 20 years. This snake-like creature could grow to the size of moons and fed on star radiation. Its massive coils shifted as it listened to something it had not heard in eons. On level 9, reality weavers began testing their psychic barriers. These beings could change the laws of physics around them. They had been contained through mental dampening fields that kept them in artificial sleep. But something was calling to them now. Something stronger than any containment. And in the deepest vault, on a level so restricted that most staff did not know it existed, something ancient responded to the music with growing excitement. Director Corvain felt the vibrations through his crystal skin. Emergency messages flooded his mind from security teams throughout the academy. But he could not look away from the human girl sitting peacefully with a tamed phantom stalker. "Impossible," whispered a board member. "How is she doing this?" Instructor Vex realized the truth first. Her scarred face went pale as understanding hit her. "She is not trying to bond with the stalker," she said quietly. "She is calling to something else. Something that has been sleeping here for a very long time." The music continued, growing more complex and beautiful. The phantom stalker had curled up completely and was making a sound like purring. But throughout the academy, ancient containment systems strained to hold creatures that were no longer sleeping. In the deepest vault, something that had waited for millions of years finally heard what it had been listening for. A voice, a song, a call from the children of those who had vanished so long ago. The first hunter opened eyes like burning stars and remembered why it had chosen to sleep so close to this small academy. On this unremarkable world, the shepherds had returned. The emergency alarms grew louder as Hana continued to play her flute. Red lights flashed throughout the arena, but she seemed unaware of the chaos she was causing. The phantom stalker slept peacefully at her feet, while the most dangerous prison in the galaxy began to wake up around them. Director Corvain jumped from his seat as urgent messages flooded his mind. Every security team in the academy was reporting the same impossible thing. Creatures that had been contained for centuries were stirring. Containment fields that had never failed were showing stress warnings. "Evacuate all students immediately," Corvain ordered the other instructors. "Everyone except the human girl. Something is responding to her music and we need to understand what." The students were rushed out of the arena in confused groups. Thessian looked back at Hana with a mixture of fear and anger. This was supposed to be her moment of triumph, not some human's mysterious display. As the arena emptied, the alarms got worse. Deep underground, technicians watched their instruments with growing terror. Level after level of the most secure prison cells were showing signs of activity. "Sir," a frightened voice came over the communication system. "The Void Devourer is awake. It has been pressing against its containment field for 10 minutes. The field is holding but showing stress fractures. The stellar worm is moving, reported another voice. Its biosigns are the strongest we have recorded in 2 decades. It seems to be listening to something. Reality weavers on level 9 are attempting to use their abilities. Mental dampening fields are compensating, but we do not know for how long. But the most frightening report came from the deepest level of all. Directors, said a voice shaking with fear. The restricted vault is showing activity. The Class S prime containment is under stress. We have never seen readings like this before. Director Corvain felt his crystal skin go cold. The restricted vault held something so dangerous that only he and 2 other beings in the galaxy knew what was down there. It had been sleeping for over 200 years. If it woke up, nothing would be able to stop it. What exactly is in that vault? Asked Instructor Vex. She had worked at the academy for 50 years but had never been told about the deepest level. Corvain hesitated. The truth had been hidden for good reasons, but with alarms blaring and ancient containments failing, secrecy seemed less important than survival. We need to access the old records, he said finally. Files from the First Galactic Council. Files that explain why this academy was really built here. They rushed to the archives while Hana continued playing, unaware that her simple music was unraveling security systems that had protected the galaxy for millennia. The phantom stalker at her feet purred contentedly. But deep below, much larger things were testing their chains. In the archives, Corvain found files sealed with symbols from governments that had fallen 1,000 years ago. The truth was written in languages most species had forgotten. The academy was not built here for training, he read aloud. It was built as a prison, a very specific prison for a very specific prisoner. The files revealed the history that had been hidden from modern civilization. Long ago, when the first species began to explore space, they discovered they were not alone. Other beings had been traveling between stars for eons. Most of these ancient races were peaceful or simply ignored the newcomers. But one being was different. It was called the First Hunter in the old records. It was older than most civilizations and more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. But it was not evil or destructive. Instead, it seemed to be waiting for something, searching for something. The First Hunter had once been bonded to a species called the Eternal Shepherds. These beings could communicate with any living creature through what they called the original song. It was not telepathy or pheromone control or bioelectricity. It was something deeper and more fundamental. But the shepherds had vanished from the galaxy millions of years ago. No one knew where they went or what happened to them. Their ancient partner fell into a deep sleep, waiting for their return. The First Galactic Council decided the sleeping entity was too dangerous to leave unguarded, Corvain read. They built this academy around its resting place. The cover story about training beast tamers was perfect. No one would question why so many powerful beings gathered here. Instructor Vex stared at the ancient text, and now something has woken it up. The humans' music. They looked at each other with growing understanding and terror. If the First Hunter was awakening, it meant only one thing. It had heard something that reminded it of the original song. Something that sounded like the voices of the shepherds it had lost so long ago. The human, Corvain said quietly. She is not failing to bond with our creatures. She has been unconsciously calling to something far more powerful. In the arena, Hana finally stopped playing. She opened her eyes and looked down at the phantom stalker sleeping peacefully beside her. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she had successfully connected with a creature. It should have been a moment of triumph. But something was wrong. The air felt heavy and electric. The walls seemed to vibrate with a deep, low sound that was felt more than heard. "Hello, little one," a voice said inside her mind. It was not like the mental speech of the Vorth. This voice was older and deeper, like the sound of mountains growing or stars being born. It carried weight and power that made her grandfather's flute feel like a toy. "You have been singing the old songs," the voice continued. "Songs I have not heard since the shepherds walked among the stars." Hana looked around the empty arena, confused and frightened. "Who are you? Where are you?" "I am very far below you, child. I have been sleeping in the deep places, dreaming of voices that were lost long ago. But you carry their echo, do you not? The music of those who could speak to all living things." The floor beneath Hana began to shake, not violently but with a steady rhythm like a heartbeat. The phantom stalker woke up and looked toward the deepest parts of the academy, with what might have been recognition. "I do not understand," Hana said out loud. "I am just a human. I can barely bond with practice creatures." A sound like gentle laughter filled her mind. "You are so much more than that, little shepherd. Your people may have forgotten, but I remember. I remember the original songs and the voices that sang them. I remember my partners who vanished into the unknown, leaving me to sleep and wait." Far above, Director Corvain and Instructor Vex raced back toward the arena. The alarms had reached critical levels. Containment systems throughout the academy were failing one by one. But instead of escaping their prisons, the ancient creatures seemed to be waiting for something. They were all turning toward the same direction. Toward the deepest vault where something impossible was about to happen. "The vault door," gasped a security guard over the communication system. "It is opening. Not breaking, opening, like it recognizes a key. Evacuate everyone," Corvain ordered. "Get them as far from the academy as possible." But even as he gave the order, he knew it was too late. Whatever was coming had been waiting for millions of years. It would not be stopped by walls or weapons or the desperate plans of frightened administrators. In the arena, Hana felt the presence growing closer. The voice in her mind became clearer and more real with each passing moment. "Do not fear me, little shepherd," it said gently. "I mean no harm to you or your kind. I have simply been waiting so very long to hear the songs again. To know that somewhere in this vast galaxy, the music continues." The floor cracked open near the center of the arena, not with violence but with careful precision, as if something was politely making room for itself. Light began to shine up from the depths. Not harsh light, but something warm and welcoming. "I'm coming to see you now," the voice said. "It has been so long since I looked upon one who carries the gift of the original song." Hana clutched her grandfather's flute and tried not to be afraid. She did not understand what was happening, but she was beginning to realize that her music was more than just pretty sounds. It was something ancient and important that connected her to powers she had never imagined. The first hunter was rising from its long sleep, called by songs it thought it would never hear again. The vault door did not explode or shatter like everyone expected. Instead, it simply opened with a soft sound like a breath of wind. The metal that had contained the first hunter for 2 centuries moved aside as easily as curtains. Director Corvain reached the arena just as light began pouring up from the crack in the floor. It was not the harsh light of technology or the burning light of stars. This light felt alive, warm and welcoming like sunlight through leaves. "Hana," he called out, his crystal skin flashing with urgency. "Move away from there. You do not understand what you have awakened." But Hana could not move. The voice in her mind was growing stronger and clearer. She felt a presence rising toward her that was older than anything she could imagine, yet somehow it felt familiar, like a half-remembered dream or a song her grandfather might have hummed when she was very small. "I will not harm the child," the voice said, and now Director Corvain could hear it too. It spoke directly into their minds, but without the sharp intrusion of Vorth telepathy. This mental voice felt natural, like thoughts they might have had themselves. "What are you?" Corvain asked, though part of him already knew from the ancient files. "I am the first hunter," came the reply. "I am the last of my kind, bonded to a people who vanished from the galaxy long ago. I have been sleeping, waiting for their return. This child carries their gift." The crack in the floor widened, but still without violence. Stone and metal moved aside gently, making room for something immense to rise from the depths. Hana could see shapes moving in the light below, but they shifted and changed too quickly for her eyes to follow. "The Eternal Shepherds," Corvain said, remembering the files he had read. "They disappeared millions of years ago." "Not disappeared," the first hunter corrected. "Scattered, hidden, integrated with younger species on distant worlds. They knew that someday the galaxy would need their gift again, so they made sure it would survive." A form began to emerge from the light. At first it looked like a massive wolf with stars for eyes. Then it seemed more like a person made of flowing energy. Sometimes it appeared to be pure music given shape, notes and harmonies dancing in the air. Hana realized that the first hunter did not have a single form. It was so ancient and powerful that it existed in multiple ways at once, showing different aspects to different observers. "The humans," she said suddenly, understanding flooding through her. "Some humans carry the blood of the shepherds." "Yes, little one. Your grandfather taught you songs from the mountains, did he not? Songs that called to wild creatures and made them peaceful?" Those were not just human music. They were echoes of the original song, passed down through generations who forgot their true meaning. More memories came to Hana now. Times when wild animals had approached her family's home in the mountains. Deer that ate from her grandmother's hand. Bears that slept peacefully near their cabin. Birds that landed on her shoulders when she played her flute. She had always thought it was normal. Just something that happened in the quiet places of Earth. Now she understood that her family was special, carrying abilities that were older than human civilization. The first hunter finally emerged fully from the depths. Its presence filled the arena without crowding it, like it existed in more space than seemed possible. When it focused its attention on Hana, she felt seen and understood in a way she had never experienced before. "You have been trying so hard to copy the techniques of other species," the first hunter said gently. "Telepathy, pheromone control, bioelectric manipulation, but those are all crude approximations of something much deeper." "I do not understand," Hana said. "If I have this gift, why do the practice creatures run from me?" The answer came not in words, but in sudden understanding. The creatures at the academy sensed something in her that demanded respect rather than casual bonding. They avoided her not from fear, but from reverence, the way one might step aside for royalty. "The original song is not about control or dominance," the first hunter explained. "It is about connection. True connection that respects the nature of every living thing. Your classmates try to impose their will on creatures. You sing to their spirits." Director Corvain watched in amazement as the truth became clear. Every technique taught at the academy was a pale imitation of what the shepherds had done naturally. The Vorth had developed telepathy, trying to copy mental communication. The Silthari used pheromones because they had observed chemical bonding. The Kythera manipulated electricity because they had seen neural connections. But all of these methods were like trying to paint a sunset using only black ink. They captured a shadow of the real thing but missed the essential beauty and complexity. "Show me," Hana said to the first hunter. "Show me how to really sing the original song." The ancient being's form shifted to something like a wise teacher, though the stars never left its eyes. "You already know how, child. You have been doing it all along. Your music calls to the deepest part of every living creature, the part that remembers when all life was connected in harmony." Hana lifted her grandfather's flute to her lips and began to play. But this time she did not try to control or command. She simply shared her feelings through the music. Her loneliness at being different, her joy at finally understanding her purpose, her wonder at meeting this ancient guardian. The effect was immediate and profound. Throughout the academy, every creature stopped what it was doing and listened. The void devourer in its quantum prison became calm and peaceful. The stellar worm coiled gently around itself like a sleeping cat. The reality weavers ceased their attempts to escape and simply enjoyed the beauty of the music. But more than that, other beings throughout the galaxy began to respond. On distant worlds, humans with shepherd blood felt a stirring in their hearts. In the mountains of Earth, Hana's grandfather stopped his work and smiled, remembering songs his own grandfather had taught him. On space stations and colony worlds, in the depths of oceans and the hearts of forests, creatures that had never heard human music before lifted their heads and listened to something that spoke to their souls. "The original song connects all life," the first hunter explained as Hana played. "It does not control or dominate. It simply reminds every living thing that we are all part of the same great harmony." Director Corvain felt tears on his crystal face. In all his centuries of life, he had never experienced anything so beautiful or profound. This was what creature bonding was meant to be. Not mastery, but partnership. Not control, but connection. "The academy will have to change everything," he said softly. "Yes," the first hunter agreed. "The old ways were shadows cast by light you had forgotten. Now the light returns, carried by those who remember to listen to the wild places where the original song still echoes." As Hana's music filled the arena and spread beyond, a new age began. The galaxy would have to relearn what it meant to truly communicate with other species. Humans, dismissed as primitive and weak, would be recognized as carriers of the most ancient and powerful gift in the universe. But for Hana, the most important thing was simpler. She was no longer alone. The first hunter, ancient beyond measure and patient beyond understanding, had found its shepherd again. And in their bond, the original song would continue as it had for millions of years, connecting all life across the stars. The mockery and jeering had ended. A new harmony was beginning. News of what happened at the academy spread across the galaxy, faster than light itself. Within hours, emergency councils were meeting on every major world. The impossible had occurred. A human had awakened the first hunter and revealed abilities that changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about creature bonding. Hana stood in the academy's main courtyard 3 days after the awakening. Around her, creatures of every classification moved freely for the first time in the academy's history. The phantom stalker that had first responded to her music now followed her like a loyal pet. But it was not alone. Crystal bears played peacefully with starcats. Metal wolves ran alongside flamebirds. Even the most dangerous creatures from the deep containment levels wandered the grounds without aggression or fear. The original song had created a harmony that made all conflict seem pointless. The first hunter remained nearby, its form shifting between the massive star-eyed wolf, the figure of flowing energy, and sometimes just a warm presence that could be felt but not seen. It was content to simply watch and listen as Hana learned to understand her true abilities. "I still cannot believe it," said Instructor Vex, watching a group of reality weavers help students with their mathematics homework. These beings could alter the laws of physics, but they seemed to enjoy teaching young minds about the wonders of the universe. Director Corvain approached Hana with a mixture of respect and uncertainty. His crystal skin flickered with complex emotions as he tried to process how completely his world had changed. "The Galactic Council has requested a full report," he said carefully. "They want to understand how humans possess abilities that predate all our civilizations." Hana looked up from where she sat playing her flute for a group of singing crystals. The small creatures glowed brightly as they harmonized with her music, their light painting rainbow patterns in the air. "It is not just humans," she said gently. "The first hunter explained it to me. The shepherds did not disappear. They spread their gifts across many species before they left. Some humans carry their songs, but so do others." As if summoned by her words, a transport ship landed in the courtyard. The passengers who emerged were not what anyone expected. A group of beings from species the Academy had never accepted before stepped onto the Academy grounds. There was Daihun, a young human from the ice moons of Europa, carrying an instrument made from crystallized whale song. Behind him came Minjae, a Altarian whose people were dismissed as simple farmers, but who hummed melodies that made plants grow in impossible ways. A female Zephyrian named Nyan emerged from the ship with a voice that could call rain from clear skies. Her people had been ignored by the galactic community because they seemed to have no technology, but they had never needed machines when they could speak directly to the forces of nature. Even more surprising was Bogum, a young Vorth whose crystal skin rang with harmonics his own people had never heard before. His family had thought him defective because his telepathy was weak, but now they realized he was trying to communicate in a much older way. "We felt the awakening," Daehun explained to the assembled crowd. "All across the galaxy, those with shepherd blood felt the original song calling. We came as quickly as we could." The first hunter's attention focused on the newcomers with warm approval. "Yes, I can sense it in all of you. Different species, different worlds, but all carrying the same ancient gift." The shepherds were wiser than even I understood. Over the following weeks, more beings arrived from across the galaxy. Each carried some fragment of the original song, adapted to their species and their world, but recognizably part of the same greater harmony. The Academy transformed from a place of competition and hierarchy into something entirely new. Students who had mocked Hana now came to her with respect and curiosity. Thessian, the proud Silthari who had been so cruel, approached her one morning with unusual humility. "I owe you an apology," Thessian said, her scales showing colors of shame and regret. "I thought strength came from dominance. I did not understand that true power comes from connection." "You do not need to apologize," Hana replied, playing a gentle melody that made nearby flame flowers bloom brighter. "You were taught what your people believed was true. Now we all have a chance to learn something better." The changes went far beyond the Academy. Across the galaxy, species that had been dismissed as primitive or unimportant were suddenly recognized as carriers of ancient wisdom. Trade agreements were rewritten. Diplomatic relationships were rebuilt. The entire structure of galactic society shifted as beings realized that technological advancement was not the only measure of a civilization's worth. Humans, who had barely been accepted into galactic society, found themselves in unexpected demand. Every major world wanted to send representatives to Earth to learn about the original song. Hana's grandfather, still living quietly in his mountain cabin, suddenly found himself hosting visitors from across the stars who wanted to learn his simple melodies. But the most profound change was in how all species approached their relationships with other living beings. The techniques taught at the academy, telepathic control, pheromone manipulation, bioelectric domination, were gradually replaced by methods based on the original song. Students learned to listen before they tried to communicate. They studied harmony instead of control. They practiced respect rather than dominance. Creatures that had been treated as tools or weapons became partners and friends. Jiho, the Kithera student who had once used electricity to control metal wolves, now worked alongside them as equals. His bioelectric abilities had evolved into something gentler, a way of sharing emotions and intentions rather than forcing obedience. Drakan discovered that his Vorth telepathy became much more powerful when he stopped trying to impose his thoughts on others and instead learned to create mental harmonies that others could choose to join. Even the most dangerous creatures responded to these new methods. The stellar worm, which could grow to the size of moons, became a gentle giant that enjoyed carrying students on journeys between planets. The Void Devourer learned to use its reality-consuming abilities to clean up space debris instead of threatening civilizations. 6 months after the awakening, Hana stood once again in the main courtyard. But now she was not alone. Students from hundreds of species surrounded her, all learning to sing their own versions of the original song. Creatures of every classification moved freely among them, no longer prisoners or tools but partners in a greater harmony. The first hunter watched from its favorite spot beneath a tree that grew crystal fruit and sang in the wind. Its ancient eyes were brighter than they had been in millions of years, filled with hope instead of the patient sadness that had marked its long wait. "Are you happy now?" Hana asked during one of their quiet conversations. "You waited so long to hear the songs again." "I am more than happy, little shepherd," the first hunter replied. "I am complete." The shepherds knew this day would come. They scattered their gifts knowing that someday the galaxy would be ready to hear the original song again. "What happens now?" Hana asked. "Will you sleep again?" The ancient being's form shifted to something like a proud teacher watching students surpass expectations. "No more sleeping. There is too much work to do. Too many species to teach, too many connections to rebuild. The galaxy is finally ready to remember what harmony truly means." As evening fell over Nexus Prime, Hana played her grandfather's flute while students and creatures gathered around her. The melody rose into the darkening sky and spread across space, carrying a message of connection and hope to every world where beings were learning to listen. The original song had returned to the galaxy, and with it came the promise that no living being would ever have to face the universe alone again. In the mountains of Earth, an old man smiled as he taught his grandson a simple melody, never knowing that his songs were helping to heal a galaxy that had forgotten how to truly sing. The hierarchy of dominance and control was ending. The age of harmony had begun, and at the center of it all, a young human woman played music that connected every living soul across the stars, proving once and for all that the greatest power in the universe was not the ability to control others, but the wisdom to understand that all life was part of the same eternal song. 1 year after the Great Awakening, as historians had begun calling it, the galaxy looked completely different. The Galactic Beast Taming Academy had become the center for harmonic studies, welcoming beings from species that had never been considered worthy of higher education before. Hana walked through the expanded campus, which now covered 3 times its original size. New buildings had grown rather than being built, created through partnerships between reality weavers and plant-singing students who could coax living structures from seeds. The architecture was alive, breathing with the rhythms of those who lived and learned within. "Professor Hana," called a young voice behind her. She turned to see Chae-young, a human girl no more than 16, running toward her with excitement. The girl carried a simple wooden drum, carved by her grandmother on the farming world of New Kenya. Like many humans who had been discovered after the awakening, Chae-young had grown up thinking her ability to calm storm beasts was just a useful farm skill. "The deep space whales are singing again," Chae-young said breathlessly. The monitoring station picked up their songs from the Andromeda approach. They have been silent for 300 years, but now they are calling to each other across the void. Hana smiled, though the news did not surprise her. Every month brought reports of ancient creatures returning to behaviors that had been thought lost forever. The original song was spreading through the galaxy like ripples on a pond, touching species and worlds that had forgotten their connection to the greater harmony. The whales remember, Hana said gently. When the song was weak, they had no reason to call to each other across such vast distances. Now they know they will be heard and understood. They walked together toward the Central Harmony Chamber, a great dome at the heart of the campus where students from dozens of species practiced together. Through the transparent walls, they could see an amazing sight that would have been impossible just a year before. Vorth students sat in meditation circles with reality weavers, their crystal skin resonating with the physics-altering harmonics of their partners. Silthari dancers moved in perfect synchronization with stellar worms, their combined grace creating patterns that were beautiful beyond description. Kithara students worked alongside humans, their bioelectric abilities enhanced and gentled by the original song until they could share emotions as easily as thoughts. Even the most aggressive predator species had sent their young to learn the new ways. In the center of it all sat the first hunter, no longer the lonely guardian of a sleeping prison, but a teacher surrounded by eager students. Its form today appeared as an ancient tree with leaves that showed glimpses of distant stars, its roots extending deep into the living floor while its branches reached toward infinite possibilities. How many new students arrived this week? Hana asked Director Corvain as he approached them. The old Vorth's crystal skin had changed over the past year, becoming clearer and brighter as he learned to harmonize rather than dominate. His telepathic abilities had grown stronger even as they became gentler, allowing him to facilitate conversations between species that had never been able to communicate before. 47, he replied with satisfaction, including a delegation from the Outer Rim territories. Species we had never even heard of before are making contact just to learn about the song. And the resistance movements? Hana asked quietly. Corvain's expression grew more serious. Not everyone in the galaxy had welcomed the changes brought by the Great Awakening. Some species, particularly those whose power had been based on their supposed superiority in creature control, had formed groups opposing the spread of harmonic techniques. The Dominion Coalition, led by traditionalist Vorth and Silthari nobles, argued that the old ways were proven and safe while these new methods were dangerous experiments. They pointed to incidents where inexperienced students had accidentally influenced weather patterns or caused mass animal migrations by singing too powerfully. 3 more worlds have banned harmonic studies, Corvain admitted. They claim we are corrupting their traditional values. But 12 others have officially adopted the song as their primary method of creature relations. Change is always frightening, the first hunter observed, its voice carrying the warmth of sunlight through leaves. Even good change challenges people to question what they thought they knew about themselves and their world. Hana nodded thoughtfully. She had received death threats from extremist groups who blamed her for destroying the natural order. Some called her a dangerous revolutionary who would bring chaos to the galaxy. Others accused her of being a fraud who had somehow tricked the first hunter into supporting human interests. But for every voice of opposition, there were dozens of success stories. Farming worlds reported unprecedented cooperation from their livestock and wildlife. Mining colonies found that creatures on hostile planets became helpful guides instead of deadly obstacles. Even pirate groups had begun recruiting shepherds, not for conquest but for the practical advantage of being able to communicate with any species they encountered. There is something else, Corvain said hesitantly. We received a message from the Deep Survey expedition. They found something in the galactic core region. Hana felt a chill run down her spine. The Deep Survey was a scientific mission that had been exploring the mysterious center of the galaxy for over a century. They rarely sent messages because they were so far from civilization that communication took months to reach inhabited space. What did they find? She asked. Ruins, Corvain replied. Structures that predate any known civilization. But that is not the interesting part. The ruins are singing. The first hunter's form shifted from tree to something more attentive, stars brightening in what might have been eyes. Singing how? The same harmonics as the original song, Corvain explained, but much more complex. The expedition team includes several shepherds, and they report that the ruins respond to their music. Ancient machinery is activating after millions of years of silence. Understanding dawned on Hana like sunrise. The shepherds, she whispered. They did not just disappear from the galaxy. They went somewhere. They built something. The first hunter's attention focused completely on the conversation now. I wondered where they went, it said softly. I assumed they had died out or transcended to another plane of existence. But if they built something in the galactic core, they left us a message, Hana realized. Or maybe something more than a message. Something they wanted us to find when we were ready to hear the song again. The implications were staggering. If the Eternal Shepherds had built structures in the galactic core, they might contain knowledge and technologies based on principles the current galaxy was only beginning to rediscover. The original song might be just the beginning of what humanity and its allies could accomplish. We need to go there, Hana said firmly. We need to see what they left for us. The journey would take years, Corvain warned, and the galactic core is one of the most dangerous regions of space. Black holes, radiation storms, gravitational anomalies that can tear ships apart. But not if we go with proper companions, the first hunter suggested. Its form began to shift toward something like a ship made of starlight. I have not traveled beyond this system in eons. Perhaps it is time to see what my old partners built in the deep places. Excitement filled Hana as she imagined the possibilities. A journey to the galactic core with the first hunter as their guide, seeking the lost works of the Eternal Shepherds. They would take students and teachers from every species that had learned the song, creating a harmony expedition unlike anything in galactic history. But even as she planned, she knew the journey would be more than exploration. The opposition groups would see their departure as an opportunity to discredit or destroy the harmonic movement. Pirates and scavengers would hunt them for the secrets they might discover. The very forces of space and time around the galactic core would test their abilities to their limits. When do we leave? She asked. The first hunter's form solidified into something like a wise captain preparing for the greatest voyage of their life. As soon as we can gather a crew worthy of the original song. The shepherds have been waiting millions of years for us to find them. I think they can wait a little longer while we prepare properly. As word spread through the academy that an expedition was being planned to the galactic core, students and teachers from across the campus volunteered to join. They came not for glory or treasure, but for the chance to discover the deepest secrets of the harmony that connected all living things. The galaxy was about to learn that the Great Awakening had been only the beginning. The true legacy of the Eternal Shepherds was waiting in the singing ruins at the heart of creation itself. And Hana, the human girl who had been mocked for her failures, would lead them home to mysteries older than the stars.